Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Harrison, the Dean of the Keese School, and welcome to our presentation this evening. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to remind you to silence your cell phones because that's a kind of music we don't need to hear tonight. Earlier this year, following a Keese School presentation of poetry with Kathleen O'Toole and friends, someone from the audience asked if hip-hop was poetry. We thought that was a question that needed an in-depth answer. So we asked Yoshi Horiguchi, the bass player with the Iris Project, if he knew an expert on the subject. Yoshi suggested his friend, Wendell Patrick, who is here with us tonight. Wendell is Associate Professor of Music Engineering and Technology at the Peabody Institute of Music. He currently teaches hip-hop music production, history, and practice at Peabody, the first course of its kind to be taught at a major traditional music conservatory anywhere in the United States. Wendell majored in both music and political science at Emory University and earned a master's degree in piano performance as a student at the Northwestern University School of Music. He is equally at home performing on stage with his band, behind two turntables, beatboxing, improvising, or playing a Mozart piano concerto. So please welcome our speaker tonight, Wendell Patrick.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Kate, so much for that wonderful introduction. And it's nice to know that I'm here by way of, one, a friend of mine, Yoshi Horiguchi, and two, by way of a query, which is a good one, is hip-hop poetry. And I'll give you an answer at the end. So yes, it's a pleasure to be here, and I reside in Baltimore, Maryland, and I am an associate professor at the Peabody Institute, and I'm also the director of the first ever Bachelor of Music in Hip Hop degree program anywhere in the world. This is actually the first year. We have our freshman class there now, some amazing students, and it's very, very exciting for me to be in that position and to be able to come and share with audiences such as yourselves. So, thank you. So, what I'd like to do today is give a little bit of a historical perspective with regards to hip-hop, and also talk a little bit about what it is that I do with regards to the genre, how I interact with it, and how that came about. And also talk about sort of the journey that hip-hop has taken really in the last 52 years, since 1973. So, again, a little bit of personal background. So that's me there. This is my official page on the Johns Hopkins University Peabody Institute website. And so I started teaching at Peabody in 2016. I'm originally a pianist, as you heard, and I taught at Loyola University, Maryland from 2001 to 2013. I started there teaching piano lessons because a friend of mine was a flautist who taught there, and one semester, I was right out of music school, they had a couple of piano students who did not have a piano teacher, and so he asked me, he said, well, would you be interested in teaching the overflow? And I thought, I have no idea how to teach, but I'd like to buy a couple of things, so it's a job. My mom will be happy. Yes, but I really hope that they never ask me to teach a class, right? So I started teaching there. I taught two wonderful young students. I was 24 at the time, and as these things go, I went from teaching two students the first semester to 5 students the second semester, and 8 students the third semester, all the while dreading being asked to teach an actual lecture course. My third year there, that's what happened. I got asked to teach Intro to Music Theory, And I was sure I would be terrible at it, and I was sure I would not enjoy it, but there was something else that I wanted to buy. So I said, sure, I'll do it for a semester. And I ended up absolutely loving teaching. It was one of the biggest surprises and shocks, and really a very pleasant one. And so, again, I taught at Loyola from 2001 to 2013 and ended up teaching all sorts of things there. I taught intro to music theory, advanced music theory, electronic music production, romantic music history. I taught individual piano lessons, class piano lessons. And all the while, my production career started to take off. I started producing, which is much of what I do now, most of what I do now, I'd say, completely for cathartic purposes. I was always practicing the piano, and it was very stressful and very serious, and I wanted to be able to do something artistically that would provide me with pleasure and growth, but was very low stakes. And so I just started producing and making these honestly pretty bad beats. Like, they were not good, but I felt good making them and had no intention of really doing anything with them. And then at some point, shared them with a friend, and they said, wow, what are you doing with these? And I said, what do you mean? I'm not doing anything with them. And they said, well, you should really consider putting something together and maybe putting it out into the world. So as you can see here, it says Wendell Patrick, and that is a name that I use. That is not my actual name. My legal name, my government name, is Kevin Gift, like a birthday gift. And I was actually born a twin, and my twin brother did not survive the birth, or perhaps survived for a day. It's a little bit unclear as to what actually happened, because they were trying very hard to make sure that my mother was okay. But he did not survive, and his first name was Wendell, and his middle name was Patrick, and his last name was Gift. So when I started to do more music production and things in the electronic realm, I thought, well, why don't I use another name to make it so that it's less confusing? And so I started using the name Wendell Patrick, which has resulted in a tremendous amount of confusion over the years. It's quite comical at times. There have been a couple of instances where I've had students at Peabody, where I've been since 2016, and they'll reach out to me and they'll say, I was registered for your class, but someone else is teaching it. Well, what do I do? And I'd say, well, who's teaching it? And they said, somebody named Kevin Gift. And I was like, oh, no, that's me. Every once in a while, it would reset within the system. But, so this is my 10th year at Peabody, teaching hip-hop. And this is actually the page for the hip-hop degree. That's the hip-hop ensemble, which I lead. And this is beginning of actually a hip-hop ensemble performance at Peabody Conservatory. This was a couple of years ago. And so I have a very rich and vibrant musical life. I perform, I teach, I get to speak, and produce. So these are some of the other things that I do. This is a performance at Chicago's Symphony Hall. And as it was mentioned, I was a graduate student at Northwestern University School of Music, and would often go to this hall hoping to one day be on stage performing. And at the time, I thought I would be performing on the piano if I ever did. But I now perform in a lot of places on turntables, right? So this is me there. I look very happy. Performing with an amazing vocalist and tap dancer. This is Brene Ali. This is in Chicago. This was a performance at Seiji Ozawa Hall in Tanglewood with the Empire State Youth Orchestra, playing a concerto for turntables and cello, actually. This is a performance with the Peabody Symphony Orchestra, where I was asked to do the vocal part of a piece written by Laura Cartman, featuring the poetry of Langston Hughes, called Ask Your Mama. So I was doing spoken word poetry here. This picture was taken about 3 years ago in Berlin, and this was at the World Finger Drumming Championships. So I don't know if any of you have any idea what finger drumming is. So finger drumming is something that I started doing before I even knew it was called finger drumming, but it was when I was producing and making beats. It was something I did and got better and better at it. And started to make very surprisingly, a name worldwide for finger drumming, and the federation reached out to me and asked me to come and be a judge at the World Finger Drumming Championships. So, this is the Baltimore Boom Bap Society. Boom bap is a phrase that refers to a specific kind of hip hop beat, right? So the boom part of boom bap refers to the bass, and the bap refers to like the snare drum. So it's like the boom bap, the boom boom bap, right? So that's what that refers to. So the Baltimore Boom Bap Society is an improvised hip hop collective that I co-curate with the gentleman in the front who goes by DJ AA. His name is Eric Spangler, and these are all different musicians, instrumentalists, vocalists, MCs from the Baltimore area, and we're all really good friends, and we would do these shows every month. We've done over 100 of them over the period of 13 years. This is a picture of me in a studio with a rapper named Rakim, who is my favorite rapper of all time. When I was growing up, this man was on I had posters of him on my wall. Was been very fortunate over the years to then befriend this incredible artist, and he asked me to work with him on his project. So my hip-hop journey has also led me to be a TV host. So I am the host of Artworks on Maryland Public Television. Some of you may tune into that show. You may have seen me there. And in 2021, I was a fellow at the Hip Hop Archives at Harvard University. So another incredible part of my journey, which again started very humbly with just me making little beats that were not very good for fun. But you really never know where things will lead if you keep at them. So I have 5 solo albums where I play everything on every album. The one in the middle is the first album that's called Sound. There's Travel, forthcoming, JDWP, which is a tribute to one of my favorite producers, Jay Dilla, and then Passage. And that's a recent picture of me looking happy, which I'm very pleased is the case. I can tell you that as an artist, as a musician, my mother was very worried early on. I heard, what are you gonna do? A lot. What are you gonna do? And then once I started doing things, it was, what are you gonna do next? You know? And then at some point, that stopped. And I could just see the pride on her face. So. And that's me. So that's where this all started for me. So my hip-hop journey started the way a lot of people's hip-hop journeys started, which is with whatever musical instrument or musical exposure you had, right? So as I mentioned, I am now the director of a hip-hop degree program. Up until literally this program, there's never been sort of like a formal path or track to or of study, I should say. One of the things that people ask me a lot about with this new degree is they'll say, things like, how do you feel this degree legitimizes hip hop? Or how do you feel now that it's finally in the upper echelons of academia? And one of the things that I say is that I'm very happy that it's there. I don't think it needs to be there. I don't think that being there legitimizes it. I don't have a hip-hop degree. Nobody that I know has a hip-hop degree. But what it does is it provides a wonderful opportunity for like-minded individuals and musicians to experience instruction, formal instruction from practitioners who are stellar in an environment where they can mix with other musicians and practitioners of other genres, whether it's classical music or jazz. There's an incredible dance department there as well. There's all sorts of resources, electronic equipment. And so I started as a pianist, my love of music. This is actually in Caracas, Venezuela, where I moved when I was 3 years old. And this is my teacher over there on your far right, the left of the image, and this was a performance. So this would have been 1977. And, no, I'm sorry, I moved there in 1976. This would have been 1979. So if only there were video of, back then. Oh, look, there's video. Yeah. So I was about 6 years old here. So that was Bach Prelude. Oh, thank you. And so that was much of my life as a child. I was very, very involved in music. Loved music. I've always loved music. And that was what I studied. This is me performing with an orchestra in Bolivia in around 2005, I believe, playing Mozart. Okay, so, again, without any sort of real formal pathway, one of the things that I love about people that I know that are practitioners of hip hop is we all came to it in unique ways. Certainly for me, that was the case. So, hip hop. I imagine everybody here has, at the very least, heard that term before somewhere, okay? And this is a picture of a hip-hop performance. This is actually a very, very famous rapper by the name of Kendrick Lamar, and thousands upon thousands of admiring fans and concertgoers. This was also a hip-hop concert, but back in the early days. This is what hip-hop concerts looked like when hip-hop started, okay? Which was around 1973 in the Bronx, New York. And many hip-hop events were parties that were outdoors. This was, again, in the very early days when parties had started to move outdoors because the spaces where they were held could no longer hold the amount of people that were coming to the events. But these events were not taking place in any clubs. They weren't taking place really indoors because hip-hop wasn't really a thing yet. These early practitioners didn't really know what they were doing or even what to call it. But very early on, there were some elements that solidified with regards to the genre. And there are 4 up here, but really there are 5. So, and I'll tell you about the 5th one momentarily. But so the first one is there's graffiti writing, there's rapping or MCing, right? So an MC is somebody who raps. Then there's DJing or scratching. So many of you have no doubt seen a DJ before or heard of a DJ, but this was a very specific kind of DJing, which is different from DJs on the radio at the time, for example. Although hip-hop DJs did take certain cues and did imitate also radio DJs. And then the 4th element was breakdancing. So dance was a very big part of the culture. So when I mentioned that I was in Venezuela as a young child. I was born in Chevy Chase. I actually lived in Somerset, Maryland, if you know where that is. Then when I was 3 years old, I moved to Venezuela. But when I moved back to the same Chevy Chase area. And breakdancing was everywhere when I was a child. It actually used to really bother my mom, because if we were anywhere where there was like a reflection, like if we were at the mall or just walking past like some glass, and I'd be like, oh, I'd start, and she'd be like, cut that out. So these are 4 elements, and then the 5th element was the element of knowledge, which was introduced by somebody that I'm going to mention in just a little bit. And really it had to do with sort of knowledge of self, knowledge of culture, and understanding of culture. So really, those were the 5 primary elements. So these 3 individuals that are on the screen here were 3 of the very, very early proponents of hip-hop. On the left, we have Grandmaster Flash, one of the most influential and legendary DJs of all time, who developed some very, very important technical elements that have really gone on to be expanded upon over the decades. In the middle, we have Kool Herc, who is widely credited as throwing the first hip-hop party. So he's credited as being the father of hip-hop. And then on the right, we have Africa Bambaataa, who was also a DJ, so all 3 of them were DJs, and he was very influential in moving the recorded culture and production elements of hip-hop forward. So first we have Kool Herc. So that's a picture of him on the left in the early 1980s. And as I mentioned, he's credited as throwing the first hip-hop party. So what does that mean? Well, at the time he threw this party, he did not know that it was a hip-hop party, because there was no such thing as a hip-hop party. It was just a party. The party was held in this building here, 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx, and it was held in the rec room, right? So Kool Herc and his sister were actually just throwing a back-to-school party so they could make a little bit of extra money just to buy some cool clothes, right, to go to school. And this is the flashcard. We all know flashcards. My students have never seen flashcards, which is like crazy to me. But you can see this is a flashcard that was drawn up by these kids. A DJ Kool Herc party, back to school jam, has the address, time, 25 cents for ladies, 30 cents for fellas, looks like. School's still out, right? And so the reason that Kool Herc is credited as being the father of hip-hop isn't because he knew what he was doing in terms of throwing a hip-hop party, but it's because of how he played the records that he played at this particular party. So what he would do is he would play funk and soul records, so James Brown, for example. And if any of you are familiar with James Brown or a lot of funk and soul records, there's often a part of the song that's called the breakdown or the break, where everything besides sort of like the drums, maybe a bass line, everything kind of goes away, right? The singer stops singing, a lot of the instruments leave, and for just a few bars, for a few seconds, it's just sort of stripped down to just like the drums, right? And if you think about any parties that you've gone to, sometimes those are like the parts where you really want to like get down, you know? But then it's gone. Everything comes back in, and then usually the song ends and wraps up. So what Kool Herc figured out was a way to take a record and have a copy of that record and put both copies on 2 turntable decks. And when the break from one record would end, he would use a fader on a mixer to switch to the other record and play the break again. And while that break was playing, he would lift up the needle of the record player and put it down on the previous record player and play the break again over there. So you would hear this break multiple times, which was unheard of at the time, you know. At that time, obviously, people were used to listening to music in a very linear way, right? So again, my students at Peabody, they have so many different ways of manipulating sound. And we actually do a unit on sampling using record players, and it's amusing but nice to watch them sort of discover how a record player works, because it doesn't make any sense to them. You know? But so this was a technique that Kool Herc developed to extend the break. And so that really was what made people curious about his party and want to go to the next party the following week, right? Because it wasn't like how it is now, where if we see something that we like, you just whip out a phone and send it to everyone. As we all know, back then, if you saw something that you liked, you had to tell someone, and they'd have to say, what are you talking about? And then you'd describe it, and then they'd kind of get it, but kind of not, and then you'd say, oh, come next week so you could see it, right? And so that's how these parties started to grow, and that's why they started very quickly to end up outside in the park, because they started to become too large for these individual venues. Okay? Grandmaster Flash, another of the individuals that I spoke about. So Grandmaster Flash was studying what Kool Herc was developing in terms of being able to play the two breaks back to back, which he called the merry-go-round technique. The issue with that was that if you lifted up the needle and put it down on the record, it was very difficult, as we all know, to be exact with where you would put it down, right? And so the challenge was to play one break and then seamlessly return to the other break. And that's something that Kool Herc couldn't do because, again, you just can't really do that with a needle, right? So Grandmaster Flash studied this and developed what he called the quick mix theory, which allowed him to actually extend breaks perfectly seamlessly. And I have a video from 1983, actually it might have been a little bit before that, but where he's demonstrating this particular technique.
As we make a pledge to keep new ideas running through your head, we got streaming stars to educate you on a special little section that we call How To.
I go by the name of the Grandmaster Flash from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And to all the people out there listening to this program at this time, I'd like to thank people at Cutting Edge for giving me this chance to demonstrate what the whole world wants to know exactly. What is break mixing? Well, what I'm about to do is to demonstrate to you, as the creator of the break mix, what a break mix is broken down into terms. And it goes something like this. First of all, in order to properly execute a break mix, you must have something that will reduce drag, which can either be paper or felt. I use either or. And in this case, being that there isn't another felt in the place, I will show you as such. The first phase of break mixing I will show you is called the punch phase, where I will take the foot from the 4 bars of Billie Jean and just fake it in as such. And at this moment, I will proceed to warm up till I get things going. Right there, that's what we call scratch phase. Actually being on the beat itself and manipulating my wrists back and forth as I continue. What I'm about to do right about here is called a silent phase. Doing it on beat where I left off. The next phase that I'm about to do is called, I entitle it the melodic scratch. Scratching it at a certain speed and rhythm all at the same time. next.
So, you can hear it's totally seamless, right? And he's doing what I was not allowed to do, which was touch the record. Right? That was punishable by, well, at least an early bedtime. But it was punishable. I just was not allowed to touch a record in my house, right? But you can see that is the decision that Flash made, is he would actually take a crayon and mark the record where the break was, so that he would know exactly where it was, so he could go back exactly to it and release the record on time, right? And so back then, of course, if there was a song that you liked, right? So that was Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. Billie Jean, if you owned the record or the cassette, you would play it and it would go from the start to the end. If you listened to the radio, it would play from the start to the end. And of course, I remember back then I'd be sitting ready with my tape recorder, and you'd try to get as little of the DJ's voice from the radio, and as soon as they stopped talking, you'd hit record, right? But there was no way to have the song played differently from how it actually went until this happened. And I remember, even as a kid, 11, 10 years old, going to places where this started to catch on and hearing all sorts of arrangements of these songs that just like I'd never heard before. It was fascinating to me. So a few years prior to that video, so this says 1979, there was a song called Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang that came out. I was actually in Venezuela at the time this came out. And this song really changed everything as far as the idea of hip-hop globally. I'm going to play a little bit of this song, and you probably heard some of this somewhere.
Here's Wonder Mike, Hank, and Master G, the Sugar Hill Gang.
You don't stop, rock it out, baby, rubber to the boogity bang bang, the boogie to the boogity beat. Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, and the purple, and yellow. But first, I gotta bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie. Say up, jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm, that'll make your body rock. Well, so far you've heard my voice, but I brought two friends along.
So you can actually see, even aesthetically, right, that looks a lot like disco, right? Because this really came on the heels of disco. So you'll see a lot of elements in some of the live performances or live recordings. But I imagine many of you have heard that song somewhere. So that was the first massive, surprising hip-hop hit. And after that came out, over the next few years, more and more artists started to actually record hip-hop, which was something that obviously is incredibly prevalent today, but at the time was almost unheard of, because really at that time, hip-hop was really more of an experience. It was a party you would go to, you'd be there for 4 hours, 5 hours. How do you put something like that on a record? So one of the things that really affected or made a big difference, this was 1982 to 1984, was that hip-hop, particularly the sound of it, the sounds, and the dance, started to make its way onto the big screen. Okay, so on the left, there's a very famous movie called Flashdance, which was actually about a jazz dancer. And on the right, you can see, I remember as a kid this Newsweek cover. And that individual, his name is Robert Taylor Jr., but he played the character of Lee in the movie Beat Street, which came out in 1984. And all of us wanted to be Lee. Right? I mean, look at him. He's like on his head. Super cool. So those are two movies, two other films. Also, 1984, Breakin' came out. Wild Style, I believe, came out in 1983. But at this point, Hollywood was really starting to capitalize on this, really what was turning into a craze. And as you can imagine, film really helped to propel hip-hop into the spotlight. So I'm going to show you, this is the first time breaking was seen on the big screen. So this is the iconic scene from Flashdance. What I loved about this was the dancers that you see here, they are a part of a dance crew called the Rocksteady Crew, and they are now, 4 decades later, the most revered, one of the most revered and storied hip-hop dance groups in history. But they were kids, they were teenagers at the time, and they were given this opportunity to be in this film in sort of like just a passing scene. And this passing scene became really iconic, so. Okay. So that scene was incredibly captivating. That music that you hear is actually a song called Just Begun. And so that is not an extended breakbeat, but you can hear it plays very much like an extended breakbeat. It's just this propulsive bass line. This is another scene that really captivated sort of the imagination of really the youth in 1984 that helped really to sort of like spread hip hop across the globe. This is an iconic scene from the movie Break-In, and I'm just going to play a little bit of this.
I'd like to thank you for this award. It's the recognition of my peers that makes all those agonizing days of teaching ozone. I'd like to thank you for this award. It's the recognition of my peers that makes all those agonizing days of teaching ozone everything I know.
Yeah, I don't want to stay here all night, do you?
Award winners don't push brooms.
Oh yeah? Why don't you go out and sweep, man? Who do you think you are anyway, Fred Astaire?
Who?
Just go on and sweep, knucklehead.
Okay, so again, hip hop has multiple elements, right? So a lot of times when people think of hip hop, they just think of somebody rapping, right? Hip hop actually originated before there was anybody on a microphone. And the reason people started to pick up a microphone is because DJs, like Grandmaster Flash, for example, would have a microphone at their table so that they could make announcements, right? Like they could say, you're double parked, move your car, or your mom is at the back door looking for you, things like that. But then people started to leave microphones out so that if somebody wanted to come up and say something, and they could sort of say something cleverly, they could do that. And that is what then evolved to people actually rhyming and then becoming rappers and personalities and part of groups. But there was hip hop before there was anybody actually on a microphone. Okay, so just want to talk briefly about some production tools, right? So over the years, there have been many pieces of equipment that did not originate as things that were made just to produce beats or make hip hop, but they became staples of that particular creative process. Some of these are things that are called drum machines. The ones that are, the two at the top are both drum machines, the Roland TR-808 and TR-909, the two most, really the 808 is the most iconic drum machine of all time. And then at the bottom, we have two things that are called samplers. So those look like drum machines, but they're not actually the same thing. So the 808 came out, I want to say it was in 1981, I believe, and it cost about $5,000 in 1981 money. So do the math, right? And at the time, this machine only had about 12, I think it had 12 sounds, 12 or 16 sounds in it total. And that was it. You couldn't expand on it. You couldn't add anything to it. But I remember coming into contact with one of those in, I believe it was 1984 or 1985, and I was mesmerized by this machine and what it could actually do. Now, down at the bottom, we've got samplers. Samplers were a little bit different in that you could record audio from an external source into the device and then manipulate it in different ways. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I could record audio from now until the end of time on this little device right here. Back then, a sampler had about 1.2 seconds worth of sampling time, and that was it. Right? So you could record just already that pause right there was about 3 seconds. So 1.2 seconds was very short. But what people started to do was take these tools that were designed, again, to record just different audio sources, and they started to record drum sounds, right? So drum sounds or percussive sounds last a fraction of a second, right? So what producers started to figure out is that if you could store sounds on a floppy disk, you can see on the left there's a floppy drive, you could take all the drum machines that came with 12 sounds, 16 sounds, and record all of those individual sounds and save them onto drives. So now, instead of having one drum machine, you could have every drum machine that you could get your hands on, right? And so that really started to shift the idea of sampling. And then, of course, over time, the sampling times and the capabilities of the machines grew significantly. So I wanted to show you a video. This is something that I made as a tribute to that particular process. Right? So I made this about 2 or 3 years ago, and now a lot of these devices have emulators on computers. So I was actually using this computer to sample this record by Grover Washington Jr., who's a jazz musician that I was very much a fan of. And so this sort of demonstrates like me taking a little piece of that record and manipulating it in different ways to come up with a final result. Oop. Oh, no, it's not. I hear it playing on the computer. Try this video, let's see if this will play in the notes.
And she came with the same type game, the type of girl giving out the fake cell phone, the name Big Bang. She like catching big things, jewel ship, money clip on, flip the 6 range, and seen her on the ass, spotted her more than once. Ass so fat that you can see her from the front. She spot me like paparazzi, shot me a glance, and that Catwoman stance with the fat booty pants. Hot damn, what's your name, love? Where you came from? Neck and wrist laced up, very little makeup. The swims at the
So that particular video is in my studio at home, and in the far rear of the video, I don't know if you could see, there's a piano in the back, grand piano. That's the first piece of equipment I ever owned. It's actually this that's here, down here. And so I have, as a producer, accumulated a number of tools to be able to do what I do creatively. And many of these tools started out as, I guess you could say, like hip-hop production devices. But one of the things that I really love to do is to use them in ways that are counter to what people might think a typical use of them might be. So I'm going to show you two examples of that. So this next one, I mentioned that I judged the World Finger Drumming Championships, right? So this is a device, it's called an Ableton Push, and I'm actually doing some finger drumming on here. One of the things that I discovered was that my abilities as a pianist really translated to being able to do lots of things in terms of hip-hop production that I just never would have thought of. So I'm going to play a little bit of this.
We use to shoot targets, soon as the darkest. On the drug market, party shit rolled up in the carpet. Those are cheaters trying to beat us. We got hookers with heaters that'll straight poppin', put more shows in your top than Adidas. The leaders looking straight charmy and our Giorgio Armani's. You wanna homie and all you got to come get through a whole army. The CeeLo rollers, money folders, sipping bowler, holding that payola, slinging the coke without the cola. Me and Black don't fake jacks, but we.
So with this device, you can actually set it up in lots of different ways. Really, whatever you can think of or conceive of, conceptualize, you can set it up in that way. And so this is an example you will see of a very different use of this particular device. Okay, so that is Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring by Johann Sebastian Bach. And so in terms of an industry, not just in terms of performing or recording or touring, but there are a lot of companies that have now grown up as a result of this genre that didn't exist before. So in the video of Grandmaster Flash, where he was on the two turntables, he literally invented that particular methodology, right? So the felt mat that he had, the paper mat, that's something that he cut out, right, to reduce drag, right? So these were really teenagers that were coming up with these sort of like the engineering basis through hip hop for all of these designs that have then grown on to become huge corporate businesses. Okay, so I want to make sure I leave a little bit of time for questions, but I want to show you one more thing here. So technology really has allowed all of this to move forward and is really a very rich and important component of all of this. And so I want to show you okay, so this is the software, actually let's do this way, that I use to produce. And I do all kinds of production. I produce for movies and films, film scoring. I produced for other artists. I composed and produced music for hip-hop artists, jazz musicians, classical symphonies. But I wouldn't really, I don't think, be doing any of this if I hadn't just started to experiment with hip-hop production 25 years ago, and been really quite bad at it, and then gotten better and better, little by little, by little by little. So I wanted to play a little bit of this. This is software called Ableton Live, but this is an orchestral piece that I created. It was a commission, and I was actually commissioned to write a piece for an orchestra. But what they really wanted me to do, I think, was to sort of do like hip hop at the orchestra, you know, and which I do sometimes, and which is fun and enjoyable. But what I really wanted to do was to use my hip hop knowledge and basis to write a classical piece that referenced very recognizable hip hop material. So what I did is for the commission, I actually wrote a theme and variations on a song by one of my favorite hip hop artists. The song is called Auditorium, and it has this theme, that was sampled from a Bollywood film from the 1970s. And I would often find myself just humming this theme while walking, or just sitting calmly. This theme would just be in my head all the time for about 10 years. So I decided to take that theme to actually have that be the basis or the material that I wrote this around. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this so you can hear. So everything that you are hearing was played by me into and through this particular software. So, what you're hearing, you see these little notes? Let's see if you can see this. Can you see those? Okay, so every single note that you're hearing of every instrument is actually played into here, right? And I could take these notes and move them around. I don't want to because I don't want to move them around. I like how it sounds. Again, this is a tool that most people would think of as sort of like a beat making production tool, hip hop production tool that you can then use to do all kinds of things. And for me, it's really a joy to be able to use this to portray a hip hop theme that references sort of my original training that I've really sort of done all of my life. So, all right. Well, I know we don't have much time, but I wanted to see if anybody would like to ask any questions. Oh, I have a question to answer, which is poetry hip hop? So here's what I would say. I work with a lot of rappers and MCs. An MC is a very specific kind of rapper. An MC is really almost like a linguist and a curator of words, right? Rap is often thought of as sort of more for entertainment purposes, right? Which doesn't mean that an MC can't be entertaining, but there's much more sort of like like respect for the craft and skill of storytelling with words, right? Now that said, I also work with a lot of poets, and I work with some poets who are MCs who rap, and some MCs who are poets. But in most cases, some of the most amazing poets that I know who can rap don't call themselves rappers or MCs out of reverence and deference, and vice versa, right? There's some incredible poets and rappers who don't call themselves, MCs and rappers who don't call themselves poets, right? I think it might be sort of akin to maybe like a figure skater. This might not be the best analogy, but like a figure skater versus a hockey skater, right? Growing up, I used to go watch the Capitals a lot, and it's unbelievable how much body control a hockey player has, but it's very different from the type of body control that a figure skater has, right? So, yeah, that's a very mediocre comparison, but I think it makes some sense. So I guess the answer to is poetry hip hop and vice versa. I think it can be. I think there are definitely factors that correlate, but not necessarily.
I'm going to suggest, since we are just about out of time, that if you all have questions, I'm sure you'd be glad to stay here a little longer, and you can just come forward and talk